Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Discover Dorico. This is the session for May 2022, and we'll be following on from the First Steps Live that we did last time. This is First Steps Live Part 2, so we'll be continuing with what we did in the last session. So in the last session, if you've watched it before, oh, hello me, you can followed along with the PDF resource or the online resource of the First Steps Guide written by our documentation person Lily. Thank you very much, Lily. This guide is brilliant. So we're going to be continuing with that. So we've got about 50 pages in. So if you're going to follow along either live or later, then let's have a look at what you'll need to do. You can either go to dorico.com/resources, which will take you to this page. It's also, you can see it's on our blog site here. There's a Dorico First Steps Guide at the top here. So you can click on that. There's also a link to the session, which was the previous session that we've done to this one. And if you click on that link, or if you visit steinberg.help, then you can download the First Steps Guide. I'm going to be using the PDF version, and I'll tell you the page numbers as we go along if you're using the PDF version. You'll also want the demo projects. So there's a piano piece resources file here. And that has the completed version that's in there, so you know what you're aiming at. And also, usefully for this session, if you haven't done the previous video session, or if you haven't done those previous 50 pages, then this has the project that you'll need to start with. So it's got the it's called unformatted. It's the unformatted version of this piece, and that's what we'll be using in this session. So I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat. So I can see I've got hello already from a few people. I think Dave got in there first today. Well done. Yeah, I think you were a bit early. So let me know in the chat if there's any comments or questions or anything like that. I'll probably answer most of those at the end, but if you want to ask anything as we go, and I'll try and keep an eye on that as well as we go. So if you've downloaded the PDF version, it looks something like this. It was originally designed for Dorico 3.5, and what I will tell you in some of the things today, because I'm using Dorico 4, is what some of the differences are. In particular, there's a few sections in this guide that says you can only do this, for example, in Dorico Pro, and actually in version 4, Dorico Elements, you can do a lot of this in as well. So if you're using Dorico Elements, most of this will be fine. You can actually get exactly the same layout and everything else that we'll be doing in the Pro version. I'll be using Pro today, but I'll explain the differences as we go along and everything else. So here we have the Dorico project. So if you have, like I said, if you've downloaded that zip file, then you'll find that there's Dora Pijacevich's piece is in there, and this is the 3.5 page version. This in particular is on A4 paper, so that's what we'll be using. We'll look a bit into the letter sizes and other sizes as well, actually, in this session. And you'll see this one says not formatted, so in the file name you'll see it says not formatted. So this is, if you'd done all of the steps in the previous session, this is what you would have ended up with. And now what we're going to do is format it so it fits nicely onto 2 pages and look at how some of that works. And then you can use this information in future projects when you're looking at formatting things there as well. So let me just check that everything is running at this end. I think we're okay. If there's any problems and you can't hear me then or see anything, then let me know. Of course, there's always a cog at the bottom of the little video window, so if you need to, you can up the resolution, make sure you're running at the maximum resolution, and then the notation and everything else should show up clearly on there as well. If somebody wants to write in the chat and let me know that everything's okay, then we can get started and carry on from there. Right, so what you'll need to do, and I've got this open on a second screen here, is you'll also need to have probably the PDF running alongside it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend printing it because the whole PDF is about 100 pages. And if you're using that, like I said, it was actually originally the guide from version 3.5. But if you're using that, then you can scroll on, or if you look in the index, you can click on page 53, and that will get you to the right page. So. Right, so let's get started. So on page 53 tells you a bit about it and where to get the information and the file from. Page 54 says adding the title and composer. So let's go from there. So to start off with, we've just got one flow in here, and so what we're just looking at is the project title and the flow title, and also we've got you can see the flow title here as a running header. So you don't want to edit these individual bits of text because they use tokens, and we'll look a bit more into that. So when you go to the File menu here, or Project Info, or you can press Command-I or Control-I to get to the Project Info dialog. I'm using a Mac today, but it's very much similar on a PC. So in here, you can type in, for example, the title here. So we want to put Walser Bridge number 2, like that. And then the composer, and I'm going to cheat for the composer because there's some, I want to get the accents and things right in for Dora Pijacevic, so I'm going to copy and paste it out the PDF, and if you've got the PDF open on your computer, why not do the same? So now I've put the composer in there as well. Now if I just press apply here, then you'll see that we've now got the title up here and the composer, but we still have this flow 1 and all of these sections. And that's because that's using the flow header in the default template. So if we choose here in our little dialog, we've got the project information and we can go to the flow information. That's where you can see the flow title here. So instead of retyping everything into here, just scroll to the bottom and it says copy info from project. So press the copy button. It'll put the information in automatically, and when I press apply, it will then put the information here. We'll get rid of that in a minute, and it will also put it in as the running header here. Now, if you're using Dorico Pro, you could change the page template if you want to and everything else, but actually that's a quick way of doing it. Obviously, you don't have to type it in multiple times. You can put it in once, use that copy button, and that will then update everything. And if you go to page 55 in the PDF, it will also tell you about master pages and tokens. In version 4, master pages are now page templates, and it will show you those in engrave mode. So and you can see all of the areas that where they will exist as well. And if you are using Dorico Pro, then on the right-hand side, you can see they're now called page templates, and it was called master pages before. It's the same thing, just it's a different name now. Page templates probably means a bit more to you than anything else. So, and it will also show you in the PDF document, you know, what these regions are and everything else, and how you can update those from the project information. Now, what we don't recommend you do is double-click in any of these regions to update them, because you can see when I double click it shows me what the token is. If you update these or manually this way, then you'll end up with a little red triangle on the page to tell you that there's an override, and you then end up having to right click on it and reset page overrides. So it is easy, you can do it that way, but you know, it could potentially cause you problems in the future. So ideally, use the project info dialog, put the information in there, because you're then still following the page template and everything else. Now we want to hide the flow heading. So we're going to go to layout options, which is Control Shift or Command Shift on a Mac L, and that will get you to the layout options page here. And in here, for when you go to page setup and flows, we're just going to show flow headings and say never. So when I press, let me move this slightly, when I press apply, this flow header will then disappear, and it will also reuse that space on the page as well. So if you had just edited it manually and just deleted it manually, that space would still be there, but it would have nothing in it. So this is a way to make sure you also get, you know, it's not using these extra margins anymore, it's removed that space, and so you've got the space back on your page, which for this piece is going to be important. So moving on in the guide to page 57, it then says about hiding the staff labels. So if you remember, if you've done the first session that we did, we're using the full score layout here, which means we have staff labels. It says piano at the beginning. If you were using a part, and if maybe in subsequent projects the parts, they won't have those for you anyway, but if you do need to remove or show them, then this is a useful option and a useful way of showing you. In the staves and systems section here, the staff labels on the first system you can set to none, and the staff labels on subsequent systems you can set to none. Press apply, and they all now disappear. So now we've got the space back on all of these. If you want to make it look a bit more like a part, especially the default Dorico parts, then normally indents the first system here. So if you want to ever do that, indent first system of flow by, and the default is 6 spaces. So let's put that back in there. We'll press apply, and now we've got the default at the beginning. As I said, if you're using a part, actually, this would be in the part anyway. But in the first session we did, we removed the part. We just made it easy and just said we'll just use one layout, and it happens to be the full score layout that we're using, because the part layouts would normally also label the piano part in the top left, and we didn't want that either. So moving on. Changing the page size and margins, page 58. So still in this layout options, and you can see we're applying things here and pressing apply, we're leaving this dialog open. And you can leave it open on a second monitor as well if you want to see what's going on underneath if you have more than one monitor. Now back in page setup here, we're going to scroll to the top, and we've got the page size options. Now I'm using an international A4 size. You may find that your computer is defaulted to letter, which is fine, and I'm going to enter all the information for A4, and then we'll look a bit later on at changing a couple of those options, and what impact that might have if you're using letter or 9x12 or something else. But initially I'm going to go for A4. You choose which one you want to put in there. For my particular one, I also then want to change the page margins. So the page margins here says top, bottom, left and right is 14.82 millimeters. This is the default that Dorico has of showing things in millimeters. You can have everything show in inches. You can also handily, when you type into these boxes, and you can just say, for example, 11, it will go to my default, which is millimeters. But if you wanted to type, for example, for the bottom margin, 0.473 inches, then Dorico will convert that in this little dialog as well. So it will convert that back to millimeters. Or vice versa, if you're, if you're showing things in inches and you want to type in millimeters. So there's nothing to stop you still typing in here if you want to. So I want that to be 12, I want that to be 14, I want that to be 14. So that's the page margins, which are these grey. You can see these little grey lines here. So that's this space along the edge and along the top and the bottom and the left and the right of the pages. Then we have the music frame margins, which is the gap between the top of the music frame and the top of the staff, and the bottom of the staff here. So these two we're going to change to 12 millimeters, and in this case 8 millimeters for now. I'm just pressing tab and it's moving on to the next options. So now if I press apply, then you'll see the page underneath changes. So I've got different size margins here, and I've got different music frame gaps at the top and the bottom of all of the music frames, and that music frame will apply to all of the pages. So if I just now close this dialog, you can see, and I'll go back to write mode for a second, you can see we're now on 3 pages but only one system here. So now moving on in the PDF guide, so now it says at the bottom of page 59, if you want to, and if you're using Dorico Pro, and actually this is something that only exists in Dorico Pro, you can edit the page template, and you can see at the bottom here there's a little copyright information. So the page templates are over here on the right. If I just get me out of the way for a second. So we have the default page template, which is all of the subsequent pages, and we have the first page template, which is this one here. So if I double click on first, then it shows me all of the areas that you can put things in. So these are the page tokens and the project tokens that we have in here, and the project copyright. So if I didn't want this, for example, then I can choose this. I can press delete, backspace, and then on this music frame here, if I click on this little blue section here, I can either move it with the mouse, or I can use Alt to move in small steps, or I can use Command and Alt or Control and Alt to move in large steps and put it on the bottom of the page. Because we have a left and a right page here, because sometimes you might be using a left page, actually more commonly in Dorico you start with a right page, then we have both of them here, but I want them to be the same at this point. So I'll say copy left to right, and then apply and close. So that will remove that section. I've got a little bit more space at the bottom. In Dorico Elements, it isn't actually possible to do that. However, in this particular piece, it doesn't matter. It will still format nicely onto 2 pages, so don't worry about it too much if you're using Dorico Elements. There was a question about page sizes. Yes, if you want to, you can choose the full score to be A3, for example, and the parts to use A4. And in all of the document, all of these layout options and all of the other options dialogues, there's a save as default. So if you set up, your defaults that you want in there, you can do that no problem. But this is just a piano piece, and we're just going to do this on A4. So we're moving on in the document, marching on nicely. So now we're going to change the staff size. So we're going to make things very slightly smaller so that they fit on this page. So we're on page 61 now, changing the staff size. So back in layout options, Command or Control Shift L, and in the page setup section here, where we had page size at the top, we also have space size, which is effectively the staff size. So a space size is the amount of space that this F is taking up if this was a treble clef, and you can see the space size is 1.75 millimeters. The Dorico default is 7 mil. Sometimes a little generous, some people might say, others might disagree. You can change it, you can save your own defaults. So what we're going to do in this particular one to make this fit is we're going to change it to 6.5 mil. It's a piano piece. It's going to be probably relatively close to them on a piano stand. We're going to say 6.5 mil is okay. So we'll press apply. You can see the music just jumped there and changed underneath. So now we're down to 3 pages. to that this music fits on, just by a very slight change in the staff size. Moving on then, the vertical space settings. So this is in the vertical spacing section here, and there's another section, another video that we've done on ideal gaps and all of the vertical spacing options and things that you might want to change. So if you have a look for a video of ours called Leading Layouts, then there's a video about all sorts of options and explains more details of these. But today, for the ideal gaps, we're going to change the braced staff to braced staff option here. By default, it's 6, and we're going to put 4, and then you have to put a space 7/8. So it's 4 and 7/8 spaces. So spaces were defined earlier when we were changing the rastral size, and now we're going to say this is 4. And if you miss the space, you'll end up with 47/8. But so Dorico will update it. So you don't want to do that. It's 4 and 7/8. So don't forget the space. And this one here we want to change from 10 to 8. So this is the inter-system gap, the gap between systems. We're going to make it 8. When I press apply, the music changes underneath here. So now you can see we're now down to 2.5 pages. So making progress. Now what we're going to do is changing the note spacing and the cross staff beam spacing. So we're now on page 63. So what we're going to do here is go to the note spacing section here, and the default space for a crotchet or quarter note is 4 spaces, and you can see that in this little diagram here. So it's looking at what the default spacing is for various different types of notes. In this particular case, I'm going to change it to 3, put a space and a quarter. And I'm going to say the minimum space for short notes is, instead of 1 3/5, I'm going to make it 1 1/2. I'm also going to turn on this optical spacing for beams between staves, and we'll press apply. And if we just press close for a second, you'll now see that we're now down to 2 pages. So what we haven't done, we haven't used any of the move to previous system or next system buttons. We haven't used make into system. We haven't used make into frame, because that would, it's an option you could use, but it's you forcing Dorico to do those things. Actually, the note spacing option is a much better kind of overall often option for making these kind of things fit. I said we'd look at quickly at some of the other page sizes. So for example, if you were using in page setup, if you were using letter size, so if you have a common US printer and US paper, then if we put this on letter size paper and press apply, then you can see now it's going to need a bit more paper because of the different dimensions of that paper size. If I go back to the note spacing section, I could change this, for example, to 2 3/4. And if that's the only change I make, then it fits nicely on 2 pages again. So that could be one option you do, or it may be that if you have a printer capable of slightly larger paper and you're doing concert 9x12 size, then now actually you've got more than enough space, so you could increase the note spacing, and you can make the note spacing, let's say 3.5. You could put 3.5 if you want to in that dialog as well, and now you can have Dorico respace it again on that size paper. So it's up to you, depending on the paper size you've got and which way you want to do it. In my particular case, I'm just going to press undo actually, and again. So I'm going to be using A4 and doing it this way, and that's what is in the particular PDF guide. But as I said, choose the option that works for you depending on the paper size that you've got. I didn't turn me back on again, did I? So now we're on page 64, if you're following along in the PDF. One option actually you could look at is that the fact that this is page 1 and page 2, and sometimes, especially if you want a title page, you want this to be page 2 and then page 3. If this is page 1 and page 2, there's a gap down the middle here. If we go back to our layout options, so Command-Shift-L or Control-Shift-L, right at the bottom in the page setup page numbers section, you can say the initial page number is 2. And if I change this, you'll now see that the pages are stuck together. This is now page 2, and there's a little 3 up here, and it's on the opposite side as well. So if you're printing this as kind of a spreads or anything like that, then that might be useful. So it may be that actually you want to do a title page. I'm not going to do that in this session. Don't think we have time in this session. But if you wanted to do a title page, then you could do that. In Dorico Pro, you could make a new page in here. You could define a title page. If you're using Dorico Elements or Dorico SE, you might create a title page somewhere else and maybe as a PDF put it together at the end. You know, there are multiple options there. If you're having a look in the PDF guide on page 65, there's a video tutorial option. So it says, if you want to, you can refer to a video tutorial such as this one, and it will take you to a video tutorial that my colleague Anthony did, which will tell you how to create a title page if you're using Dorico Pro, and create it all in Dorico should you want to. We won't do that one today, but it's there should you want to do that one as well. There's also things you could look at. For example, in any version of Dorico, this repeat section here, the first and second time repeats, are quite close. So if you wanted to make more space, instead of dragging things around or anything else, again, in our layout options, this is where you might decide you want to change some of the margins. So the music frame margin here is currently 12mm. If you could say, for example, if we made it 15, then it would give you a bit of space here. However, the music frame margins apply to all pages, so we also have a bit of extra space here. So it depends, you know, how you want to use those. That's one option that you could potentially do as well. Now let's look at some of the other editing things that we want to do in here. So we're going to look initially at changing some stem directions. So we're going to go back into write mode for a second, and over here we've got some right hand, left hand sections here, and the guide says in these bars 30 and 31, and in 72 and 73, which are over near the end behind my head, there's one there. So I'm holding down Control or Command, in my case Command, I'm on a Mac, and selecting those. So just these 4 notes are selected, and now I'm going to press F to flip them. Now you'll notice, I'll just unflip them, this B flat will also change, because Dorico says, well, contextually, the B flat could be either way depending on the context of the notes around it. So because we flipped it, the B flat also flips. So now I'm going to choose that B flat and also the one at the end. So I'm using Command or Control just to select those two and press F again, so that now I can specify which way around the B flats go. So that's that section on page 65. Now we're going to change some beam groupings of things. So, and for a lot of this bit, it's kind of saying specific bar numbers. If you want to see the bar numbers a bit more easily, you might want to go to View System Track or press Alt or Option T, and then you'll see this little system track appear. So there'll be some grey numbers above all of the bars. So that might help tell you which bars you want. So in this particular case, it says in bar 5, we want all of these Fs. So this one here in bar 5, bar 7, in bar 21 and 23. And I'm using Command again just to select these individual notes. I also want bar 47 and bar 49 and 63 and 65. Has anybody got a full house yet? I'll show you winnings, thank you very much. Now, well, what we want to do is make these unbeamed, so we want to detach them from the notes that they were already attached to. Originally, this would have been in Edit and Beaming, but it's now in Dorico 4, Edit Notations, Beaming. So all of these notation things are put together, and then there's a Make Unbeamed. So if you go to Make Unbeamed there, then all of those notes are now unbeamed. You can also do this from a right click. So if you right click, you can go to Beaming and you can select all of these options as well. So let's do that this time and select some of those instead. So now we're going to do a slightly different beaming option, because this piece is being beamed by Dorico according to 3.4, but actually the original edition of this had some of the beaming slightly differently. So we're going to copy that. So in bar 14, choose this note here, and we'll choose the similar beat position in all of these bars like this. Oh no, not that one, I want this one. So again, I'm using Command to select all of those. Now they're all selected, and actually we want to do the same. Let's do the same over here as well. So in 56 to 59, we want to select that one, that one, that one, and that one. And now if I right click, I can go to Beaming, or you can go to the Edit menu if you prefer. I can now select the options that we have in here, and in this particular case you want Split Beam. And you can see you can add your own shortcuts to these, so if they're options that you're using a lot, then you can do Split Beam. You can make yourself a shortcut so you don't have to do the right click menu every time. So now we can see we've changed the beaming in all of those bars there. So now in bars 35 to 33 to 35, which is the bottom of page 1, we can choose this one here, and this one, and this one. And now I'm going to right click again, I'm going to go to Beaming, I'm going to realise I should have set myself a shortcut for this. I'm going to go to Split Beam like that. So that's how it was in the original edition. And if you start thinking, I should have added a shortcut to this, go to the Edit menu on a PC and Preferences, or on a Mac you go to Dorico Preferences, go to Key Commands, search the thing you want, so maybe it's something to do with beaming, and then have a look for the option you want. And if it's just beam, then it might be one of these. So for example, beaming together, make unbeamed, set yourself a shortcut for whichever one you want. It will save you a lot of time in the long run if this is the kind of work you're doing. And if beam grouping is, you need it to be consistent all the way through the piece, but it's not the one that Dorico is giving you, then in the meters popover, you can use things like square brackets to specify what the beat groupings are in that particular meter. So that can also be a very useful option to save you doing a lot of this work individually. But in this case, it's only a few places that we're doing it, so we'll do it manually. Now we're on in page 67 to aligning dynamics. Sorry if I'm moving quickly on this. You press pause. If you want to follow along, more particularly press pause, no problem at all. Let me just have a look. Is there anything comments-wise? I think they're okay. We'll come back to some of those at the end as well if there's anything there. So dynamics and aligning dynamics. These hairpins, we'd like to make them all align, or certainly align a lot more than they are now. So I can select one. I can use Command or Control to select more of them. There's also a select more command. So with a dynamic selected, if I press Command or Control Shift A, then it will select more of these items. I actually don't need these two, so I'm going to use Command to deselect those two this time. So I just have these ones selected here. And now what you want to do is you can go to Edit Notations Dynamics, or you can just right click again and go to Dynamics and group the dynamics. And when I group them, then it will put them all in a line so that they're all neatly lined up there. And we'll make a further tweak to those dynamics a bit later on. Now adjusting the shapes of slurs. In the guide, the PDF guide, it says you can only do this in Dorico Pro, but actually you can do this in Dorico Elements if you're using Dorico Elements 4. So now it says go to from bars 9 to 12, select these slurs. So I'll select these three like this, and then press F. So it's the same as flipping the stems. Pressing F will also flip the slurs. And in this particular case, they'll curve upwards and they're going to go through some of the notes. So now we need to make some further changes. So we need to select the individual handles of these. So you'll need to go to engrave mode. So Command or Control 3 for engrave mode. And now you can see the little handles. If you like to see those handles all of the time, and only if you're in Dorico Pro, you can go now to, where do we put it? In Engrave, Show Handles, there's an Always. So if you want to always see all of the handles, so you can always just instantly click on them, that might be an option you want from Dorico Pro. But otherwise, then you can do it this way. When you select an item, then it will show you the handles. So you can, for example, click on the beginning of this slur and Command or Control click on the beginning of each of those slurs. And now it actually says in the PDF, thank you Lily, that if you press, when you press Option and up arrow, it will just move a little bit. And if you use Command Option or Control Option, then it will move in a big jump. And it specifically says you probably want to move it 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that puts it neatly above that rest in each case. So that'll be the first bit. And now you can use the other handles. So let's have it, just click on, let's say, this one here. And you can move the individual ones if you want to. So again, using either just Alt or with Command and Alt, you can move these up and down to get them out of the way. And you can also move things left and right. Same shortcut. So if you want to move between these little handles, you can press Tab. So you can move between these to different things. You can press Shift Tab to go back. So you can put the slurs exactly where you want them. Now, it's not that easy in engrave mode to use the arrows to move to the next slur. So my tip here is to press Command 2 and go back to right mode, press the right arrow, which will move you on to the next of the similar item, a slur, and go back to engrave mode. Now if I press Tab, I can select the handles here, so I can move any of these items to where we want them to be. So let's say we'll put it there for now, and then we'll go right mode, right, and go back to here, and then say, do we want to adjust this one? Actually, let's bring the middle of that one just down slightly, like that. So you can see it didn't move the Poco Rit or the Tempo, because this is a stylistic change, you know, that you're deciding to make at this point. So if you want to move these, you can also select these. You could select both of them if you want, and you can use the same controls. So similarly, I think when we did the first session, Alt is your move key. You can move notes up and down. You can move notes left and right. You can move any items with Alt or Option. So I'm just using the Alt and the arrow keys to move that item up slightly. And if you use Command with a note, it would go in big jumps, which would be an octave. And for these items, then you can see they're just moving in larger jumps. So that's a very useful option. It also says that you can only do this, again, it's saying in the guide you can only do this in Dorico Pro, but you can do all of this in Dorico Elements as well, no problem at all. Including the next section, which is to make sure the LH is in the right place. And by that I mean the left hand. So these ones are okay down here, but at the end of the piece, these ones are trying to automatically get out of the way of these hairpins. So they're sitting down here instead, and we don't want them down there. So I'm going to select this one. Oh, no, I'm going to select this one and Command or Control select this one and use the Properties panel. So there's a little arrow at the bottom of the screen down here, or you can use Command 8 to open the Properties panel. So here we have these two selected, and we're going to use the Avoid Collisions. So by default, it's using the Avoid Collisions option to get out of the way. And what we'll do now is we'll toggle this option on to say I want to change the Avoid Collisions option, and I'm going to leave it off. If I turned it on, it'd be back where it was because that was the default. But leave it off means they're not now using, their spacing and everything else to get out of the way of hairpins. It just so happens that they're in the right place anyway. I don't need to drag them further. But turning that Avoid Collisions off also give me a bit of space back on the staff. You can see when I do this, it's also giving me a bit of space back on the staff, which is also what I want for the overall look. So sometimes that Avoid Collisions, just turning it off for a couple of items, can be very useful. And that's on page 70 of this guide. Page 71, it then says we're going to just alter one of the hairpins as well. So in page 39, so bar 39 to 40, which is these ones up here, we're going to choose this hairpin here. And it says just do Command Option up once, just to move it slightly. And you see again, I've got a bit of space back on the staff there, just by moving that hairpin up very slightly. Maybe you didn't want that one in the same group in the first place. You can play with those options and see what you want to do. At the bottom of page 1 in bar 33 to 35, we're also going to change these hairpins. Now when you select a hairpin, you get options at these ends, and you can change the aperture and all sorts of things. If you're careful, you can click on the center here. If you've got show handles on all the time, then you'll be able to see these and click on them more easily. I am guessing slightly, but I know roughly where they are. So now I've just got these three handles selected. And in Lily's details, it says Command Alt up 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now it's following more the direction of the notes. It then says to choose this first one at the beginning of the hairpin. So the middle one at the beginning of the hairpin, carefully chosen. And it says do the Command Option right arrow twice, 1, 2. And then Alt up arrow twice, 1, 2. So now we have the hairpins positioned a bit more following the natural way the notes are moving at that particular way in the bar. So what we've done now is we've detected collision avoidance for some of the items. We've allowed them to be positioned between the staff and the hairpins. We've moved some hairpins. We moved individual hairpin handles and all sorts of things. And these things aren't really changing the notation. We're doing all of these in engrave mode. And now in Dorico 4, you can do these in elements as well. So in Dorico Elements. So now you should have a piece of music. If we turn off that with Command 8, you should have a piece of music that looks like this. If you press, there's an item, a button, which for me is just to the left of Z on my keyboard, which will hide invisibles. So, well, it's like hide invisibles. I'll hide all of these extra items, and if you've got signposts and that kind of thing, as I've got the button held down, if I let go, they all come back. If you don't like that one, just go back to write mode, and they're not there anyway. And maybe now you turn off your system track, which was in the view menu, or Alt-T, turn off your system track. So now we have the music formatted into 2 pages. Yes, doing this live, it's taken us about half an hour, but that's because I was explaining everything exactly as we were going along. Actually, it would be a much quicker process to do it on your own. But let's have a look now at some playback things. So the playback section in this guide starts on page 73, and actually this is where things are going to be a fair bit different to in Dorico 4 because of how things work. So to start off with, if you go to play mode, you might want to check in this particular piece, for example, when you go to play and playback template, it may be using the silence template, and you can choose the Elements, the SE, or the Pro playback template specific to your to what you want to use, your version of Dorico. And you can press apply and close, it will then load the correct piano instrument. Actually, it'll be the same piano instrument for all the versions of Dorico. In the VST rack over here, you then can see that it's using Halion, and you can click on the little E if you want to edit that, make any changes actually in the plugin interface itself. You may also want to check that for playback type things, if you go to Edit and Device Setup, this is where you can choose the playback ASIO driver it says that you're using and the stereo output. If you need to check anything in there, you can do. Also, there's a link in the PDF guide to our troubleshooting video, or if you go to youtube.com/Dorico, then there's a troubleshooting video that you can look at in there, which has all sorts of options for Mac and PC. If you're not getting sound for any particular reason, you can follow that particular video. Now, when we're using these things and I'm editing things in Dorico now, in the guide it will say go to play mode. And to change things like we're going to change some dynamic levels and things like that, then it will say to go to play mode and expand this piano section here. Now in Dorico 4 it exists down here in this key editor, and just over here, this button, if you use this you can make this taller. So you can now see the notes that exist in here. You can see the key editor here, like a piano roll. But now if you go to write mode and you open that same section we were in before with Command 8, then you also have, as well as the properties down here, you also have a key editor down here. So we've got the same button, we can make it bigger this way, and we can see everything that we're doing here. So now we've got the notation and the piano roll all in the same mode. So this is where I said it differs from the particular guide. So the first thing we want to do, according to the guide, is to show the dynamics lane and show that the dynamics options that are in here. So this is where it exists in Dorico 4. And somebody might say, but hang on a minute, it's not in Dorico 4. Well, this is where I'll admit that this isn't actually the same version of Dorico potentially. This is a quick sneak preview of where the dynamics editor will be and what it will do when it's released in Dorico 4.1. So when you expand this section here, so the piano roll is now a bit smaller, we're now looking at the note velocities. You can choose the velocity option and you can go to dynamics, and you will have very shortly a dynamics editor here so that you can see the dynamic lanes again. So in the particular guide it says, as an example of things that you might want to change, then we're going to look at a few bars and change how the dynamics are. So when I click, for example, if I click on the music here, now in the middle of my screen here there's a little chain link, and this is linking these two parts of the screen together. So when I choose some notes here, they will also be highlighted here, and you see it's moved to that particular position to show me what's going on. And if I choose more notes, let's just zoom in here, if I choose more notes here, then they will all be highlighted here, and we can see the dynamic as well. So what we have going on here is a hairpin, which is going from here to here, and then because nothing else is changing, the next hairpin is taking it up another notch, and actually we don't want that in this case. So we're going to drag this point here, and we're just going to drag it down till it says -1, so that it's now in line with this one. So now it will do this hairpin, and then it will do that hairpin again, and then the next one, actually we do want it to get louder. Stylistically that will work, that's no problem. So that's the first thing we want to change. The next thing we want to do is just say, actually, we don't want it to drop at this point. We want it to drop slightly earlier. So now I'm going to use the pencil tool here. And I'm going to, in bar 22, you can see we've got bar markers here as well. I'm just going to put a point in here, which is then going to drop the dynamic at this point. And so it then has something to grow from at that point. So you can see now, you can see where the notes are in relation to where the dynamics will be. So there's a couple of options there for when you want to edit things and and use things, how you want to use them. You can use the arrow tool and you can edit some of the things. You can use the pencil tool and you can draw extra items in. If you move on to page 78 in the guide, it then says that one of the other things we want to do is from bar 27. So if we scroll along, and you can scroll along in this version here. I'm just using a trackpad and I'm using a two-finger option to slide. Or, like I said, if you choose any particular options here, then if you've got the link turned on, then it will jump to these particular bars as well, so you can move to the right section. But what we actually want is from bar 27, we want to look at some of the note velocities. So you see here there aren't any dynamics changes going on, but if we choose the dynamics option here and go to velocity, then lots of the notes here have their own individual note velocities, and actually maybe just some of those notes maybe are a bit loud for actually what we want at this point, so we're going to adjust those and make them less. So make sure there aren't any notes selected, so that all of these are red. There's nothing selected down here. Now we're going to use the line tool, and from bar 27 or thereabouts, you can then draw a line to bar 30, and you can see as I'm drawing this line, it's kind of chopping the heads off all of those velocities. So you can see it's now going to be a bit, a slight downward curve of the note velocities, that you won't have lots of them being too loud, and you can choose how much of this you want to drag and where you want to drag it to. If you then want to edit any of these, you could go back to the arrow tool and you could say, to make it natural, maybe some of these you do want to drag some of these individually, and maybe one or two you do want to change. Completely up to you. You can try this to your heart's content. For playback type things, if you're using the normal options in Dorico up here, if you have a note selected, you can press P and play from that point. You can also see there's a green playhead here. So if you click in this section here where all the bars and beats are, then you can move that playhead to somewhere in here. So if this is what you're working on and you want to move the playhead, just click on that grey bar, and when you press the space bar, Dorico will always play from wherever the playhead is. There's also an option, if you want it, to always display the playhead on the score, and sometimes if you're working maybe to picture or video, that might be the kind of thing you want. Also, if I just turn off this bottom section for a second, so you can see the whole score, if you want to ever play from the beginning, then you can also use Shift-Alt spacebar and go back to the beginning, and it will play from the beginning of the flow. And also there's the buttons up here in the toolbar, so there's a little back button here, and there's also a button here for play. So you can use those two if you want to. There's a pop-out transport control if you want to use those two, and if you have a numeric keypad, then there are buttons on there for return to 0, which is the door way of saying go back to the start, and there's a play button on there as well. So some people use that if they're more used to using a door. So P, spacebar, Shift-Alt spacebar, all sorts of options, as well as changing where the playhead exists in the bottom section and the key editor there. All sorts of options. Now, lastly, in this key editor at the bottom down here, get my mouse back. What we're going to do now is change the tempo. So the tempo in this particular piece, the Poco Rit here, if we open the key editor at the bottom, you can't initially see a tempo option down here. So there's a couple of options here. If you click on this link button here, and then you click on the Poco Rit, it will show you now the tempo editor at the bottom. And when you go back to clicking on some notes, then it will go back to it will go back to showing you the notes. The other option is you can go to play mode, and you can click on this tempo option here. So if I'm clicking on the piano, it's showing me the key editor options for the piano. And if I click on the tempo option up here, then it's showing me the tempo change. So this Poco Rit, by default, starting here. And if you look over on the left-hand side here, it will show you a little readout in a second as I hover over things to say that this is starting at 108. And then here, it's going down to about 80, 82. So what we want to do is make the Poco Rit much more exaggerated. So make sure they're not both selected. So I'm going to click over here. Just select one item, because I don't want to move both of them. I just want to move one item. And I'm going to drag this down. If I'd left them both selected, then they would both have moved. It would have kept the slant the same, but it would have changed the start tempo as well. So now I've dragged this down to 40. So I was looking over here, and it also shows you as you're dragging it, look, what you're dragging it to. So I've dragged it all the way down to 40. So now this Poco Rit will start at 108 where it was because of the grazioso that we entered in the first session, and it will now go down to 40. Also, if you're in the if you prefer, some people do, in the properties panel here, you can see the final tempo is now 37.53% of 108. So if you prefer working in a percentage, you can do that in there as well. But if not, then you can do it graphically here and change the tempo. I suppose if you want to listen to it, then so you now get that tempo change. Now we're going to change the played duration of some of these notes. So in the key editor at the bottom here, this chord we have here, and what I'm going to do in this lower section is I'm going to click where it says expression and CC, which makes that bit smaller, and now I can see all of the notes at the top. So as I choose these notes, in the top section, you can see they're highlighted. And if I choose this chord here, you remember if we click on a stem, we can highlight all of the chord, and then I can see the individual notes. So you can see that this note and these notes are all eighth notes, and this is a quarter note. Now, if you click on this option here, then you can see the played duration. So this is the notated duration and the played duration. And on the played duration, you can see that it stops slightly short. There's no slur on that one. This one overhangs because it does have a slur. And there's all sorts of options if you want to zoom in here. I'm just going to click on this bar here, left click and just drag upwards, and it's going to make this bit longer. So you can see these overhang, and these ones here, these three that are in this chord that we have selected, all start slightly later than each other because of the arpeggio line. So Dorico's added that automatically. You can tweak these. So if you want this note, for example, maybe to play a little shorter, or you want these notes to play a little longer than they're notated, I can now change that without changing the notation. If I was in the notated view, it would be changing the notation as well, but I'm only changing the sound of those. So you could have some of these notes play slightly longer, but be warned, if you do change this one and move it slightly longer, it will override this start that Dorico's put in, so you may also need to tweak the beginning. And you don't need to make them all line up, the ends of them or anything else, because actually it probably sounds more natural and more like a pianist would play it if they don't exactly line up, but you can tweak these, replay this section to see how you want it to sound. Another trick is if you press just shift spacebar, Dorico will replay from the last played position. So I can now make some more changes to this. I can change, for example, this note to be a bit longer again. Shift spacebar will replay just that little section. I've not had to select anything else and press P or anything else. Shift spacebar replays from the last selected played position. So now we've edited the durations of those for just how they sound, and we've had a look at how some of those things play. So now let's have a quick look at how we print and export these, of course. So if this is the first time you're doing a project in Dorico, let's print it and see how it looks. So I'm going to turn off the panel at the bottom, because I don't need that at the moment, and go to print mode at the top up here, or Command 5. Now in here we have the page, so we've got the layout selected here, and we can choose the printer options. We've got the job type, so we can say is it normal, spreads 2 up, or booklet, or anything else. We can change the paper size. So you could say, for example, we want 2 up. So we've got the page 2 and 3 be joined together. Maybe this is, for me, maybe this will be on A3. A3 is not shown here because my printer doesn't support it. So if I change to a different printer that does support it, then I can choose A3. It's behind my head, apologies. You can change the paper orientation if you want to here. And there's also some more options behind my head. There we go. So there's duplex printing options if your printer supports it and everything else. So you can change all of these options in here. There's also annotation options. You can also use a lot of these when you export as graphics. So if you want to export a PDF, then in the graphics section, PDF is the default. So maybe, let's just put these back to how they may be on your screen right now. So we're in A4 and defaults, and in graphics now we have page 1, I can scroll to page 2. Oh, I should say page 2, and I can scroll to page 3. The destination folder is where your PDF will be exported to. You can export as a mono, which this one would be fine and would print with proper K black, or you can use color. One option why you might want to use color is in the annotations section for whether you print or export as a PDF. There's a watermark option, so you could say, for example, proof, and that will, or prof in my case, proof. That will be in grey, so of course you'll want the color option because it's not proper black. But you've still got other job type options in here if you want them, and all of these settings are then saved with the project. So next time you open this project, it will remember all of the settings you saved, and you can choose one or more layouts that you would have in larger pieces on the left hand side and make the changes to all of those at the same time if you want to. So feel free to try printing these. Have a look if you're doing the letter size paper in the States or anything else, and various other options, no problem. All of those options will be there for your printer, or try exporting them as a PDF and having a look at those as well. Another export option you might want to use is exporting the audio. So if this piece, we've now played with the durations of the notes and everything else, we want to export it, we can go to File, Export, and we go to Audio. You can export, if you leave this ticked, then it will put each flow in an extra folder as well, so you might not want that, especially in this case where we only have one flow. You might want to export as MP3 instead of a WAV, or maybe, and this is the location it will be exported to, or maybe you do want a WAV file and you want to export the players as separate files. So if you have a piece with lots and lots of players in it and you want them all to be exported effectively as stems, each player's part would be exported as a separate file, and you could put them all in a DAW if you wanted to mix them or add real audio to them or anything else in a DAW. So those are the options in there for export audio. Feel free to have a play with those. They won't export in real time, they'll be quicker than real time, so that should help. Now, we've now got to page 86, which says further notations, and let's have a look at some of these quickly as well. So we've finished this piece, but there's some things that other notations you might want to do in Dorico that don't necessarily apply to this particular piece. So also on the first steps page that we were on here, there's also a blues song resources. If you download the blues song resources, then you will also find a piece and a file which looks like this. No, that's the one I'm on, which looks like this one. So I'm going to activate playback for this one, and this one is it's a CC Rider by Gertrude Moraney. So this one, what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly go through some of these for some other things you might want to add. So there's some lyrics and some slashes and various other things. I won't go in quite as much detail. All of the detail really is in the PDF. So from page 86 onwards in the further notations is what we're looking at now. And if you want to follow along, then absolutely do that. Press pause if any of this bit goes a bit quick, because I'm aware of time, and we'll show you some of these anyway. So if this is the first time you're doing lyrics and that kind of thing, you'll be aware of popovers from some of the things we've done before. And of course, Dorico has a popover for lyrics. So if I choose a note here, I can press Shift L. And we use popovers a lot in the first session as well. And now you can type in the lyrics. So you can say, for example, I'm, and then so, and I'm just pressing the space bar, and that's moving on to the next note for me. Now if I type and press hyphen, then it will move on, and as I type hap and type hyphen and py, you can see I'm so unhappy. I'm not actually, hopefully you aren't either, but this is a blues. They're never happy, otherwise it wouldn't be called blues, would it? It would be called some other colour. So you can type in the lyrics that way, if you want to do that. You can also, if you want to, and this is, maybe jumping ahead a little, if you already had the lyrics somewhere, like in this PDF, you can select the lyrics, you can copy them, and then when you're using the Shift L lyrics popover, you can just press paste, and every time I press paste, it's pasting in the next lyric. And these, so if I say miss and then type hyphen, then press paste again, then it's moved on. In fact, so I can show you this more easily, I'm going to go to View Galley View, and then we can just have a look at this. So we've got I made a mistake. Now don't worry about the collisions here, that's because I'm in Galley View. Dorico isn't adding loads and loads of extra space to things. If you do want it, go to vertical spacing in the layout options, and where we've got vertical justification here, you can say that I want the... Here it is. In Galley View, expand ideal gaps to, and you can make this something bigger. So let's say 175 if we want to add a bit more space. So if you want more space between staves, the lyrics are still going to potentially collide because they're not doing all of their automatic options. But as soon as you go back to page view, it will do that for you, so there's no problem there. So a couple of tips if you need them. So adding lyrics, you Shift L, you can type them in. There are lots of other options. There are some other videos as well on lyrics, but the information is all in the guide if you want to follow the PDF and add those. For adding fermatas and things, we can do those as well. So if you go along to page to bar 16, choose a note here in bar 16. I'm going to use the Shift H for holds. It's holds and pauses. You can type pause, or you can type FER for fermata. And you see Dorico's adding a fermata to all of these notes, all of the instruments. For the second one, I could do the same again, but while it's selected, I can of course also Alt-click, and so I also get the fermata there on the second note there. So that's adding fermatas. Now Dorico doesn't play those back to you, but as you've seen a few minutes ago, or if you go back in the video, then you can use the tempo track, and you can change the tempo at that point to make the pause as long as you would like. There's also lots and lots of options for playing techniques, one of which would be in this one, for example, on the cornet. Maybe it's a trumpet or something else, and you want them to be muted, and we're going to put it in a slightly more orchestral way this time. So if we do Shift P for a playing technique, another popover, we can type Con space S, and if I just press the down arrow, I can choose consort. I don't need to keep typing it. Press Enter, and I now get consort. They also exist over here on the right hand side. If you choose this item here, then there's console, and there's also mute. So if you just prefer to write mute, you can do that and just put mute instead, should you want to. And for some instruments, depending on what the instrument is, what the technique is, and what the sample library is, it will also then play back automatically using those items as well. For adding chord symbols, so for example here in the banjo part or piano part or something else, for adding chord symbols, it says you can use Shift Q and you can type in your chords. So if I type C7, it says press the space 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on page 91 if you're following along. I can type another chord, G7/D, press space a couple of times. If you have a MIDI keyboard attached, you can just play the chord. So if I play a C7 on my MIDI keyboard, it will also show me C7. So you can do chords that way as well. So you can enter chords that way, no problem. Here's an option though. In Dorico 4, now you can select a bunch of notes and get Dorico to say, analyze this and tell me what the chords are. So, but for this one particular one here, I know I want a chord here and there's no bass note. So with the default options, Dorico wouldn't do that. So what I'm going to do is choose this note here and press 8 to make it so it's a whole bar in length. That one will be fine, that one will be fine. That one I want to do the same. And if we're going to carry on, then that one will also need to be the same. So sorry Lily, I've edited it, sorry. Now I'm going to choose from bar 5, I'm going to shift select bar 16, so that I've got all of these notes selected. Now if you right click, you can go to chord symbols and diagrams, generate chord symbols from selection. I'll just choose all the defaults and press OK. So now Dorico's put in the chords here for these instruments. Now you notice I initially put chords in for the banjo and I got them in the piano part, and now I've added chords for the piano part and it's automatically put them in for the banjo. And that's because Dorico will add them for rhythm instruments automatically. And this chord here, by the way, for the banjo, if you want to move that slightly in the properties panel, then there's placement options. So you can say, for example, the alignment, instead of being left, can be centered to get it off the bar line if you want to. Maybe you don't want the bar line. Oh, the choice is yours. So Dorico is adding the chords automatically for rhythm instruments, but not for other instruments. So we'll look in a second at how we can do those as well. Let's first add some rhythm slashes. So at the beginning here, let's say that the trombone part wants to have some slashes, some rhythm slashes. So I'll choose this bar here, and I'll shift click on this bar here. I'm going to use the repeats popover, so Shift R for repeats, and I'm going to type slash. So now we have slashes, and on the right hand side over here, you can also choose these kind of things over here. There's rhythm slashes. Oh, it's behind my head. Down here, you can also choose rhythm slashes from down here if you want to, but you don't want to do that. Let's use the popover. If you add another section afterwards, so let's say all of this bit here maybe wants to also have slashes on, then you'd also see that it becomes a different color. They're a slightly different shade of green, so that you can tell the difference. But in this particular case, we actually want this one to be shorter. So I'm going to use Alt-Shift-Left, which is the standard shortcut for shortening things in Dorico, so that this is now shorter because only the singer sings on this beat, nobody else is playing. Now you can Alt-click to the banjo part, or if you've still got from the last session your duplicate to staff below shortcut, then you can use that one too. It'll do exactly the same job in this particular case. So you can add rhythm slashes and things to other parts there, no problem. Now that you've got some slashes in here, what we also might want to do is add the chords to them. So let's say we want to give the chords to the trombone player. We have the chords here. You don't need to copy them to the trombone or any other instrument, because you might have to copy all sorts of sections and everything else. If you just go to Setup Mode and you right click on your trombone player, you can say for chord symbols that you want the chord symbols to show in chord symbol and slash regions. There is such a thing as a chord symbol region as well. We're using slash regions here. So if I do that, then it will automatically, anytime there's now a slash region or a chord symbol region, it will display the chords for that instrument. So it may be that you want to do it for the other instruments. Maybe they don't want the chords at this point, but if you've added slashes to them, then they would. So for example, here in the cornet, if I right click and say chord symbols, show in chord symbol and slash regions, there's no chords here. Back into write mode, if I just put some slashes in here, then I will get the chord symbols displayed. And maybe again for these two, if I want to make them follow what I was doing in the banjo part, we can do that. So that's where you can get the chords to display, and you don't need to copy and paste them. So if one of the chords now changes, it will update all of the other parts automatically, which is very useful. It also says over here, if I just make this a bit longer, in fact, I'll show you, you can do it when you've selected it here. You can use Alt-Shift-Right and you can extend a region this way. You can drag it with a mouse, but I'm just going to extend it here. Now, if I keep going, these two slashes don't have the fermatas on them, and we want them. So what you want to do here is actually only extend the slash region to beat 2, and when you've got the caret turned on here, on this third beat of the bar, instead of an up stem voice, I don't want a note in here, I want a slash but without stems. So you use Alt-Shift-V and it says a slash stems up. That's not what I want. So I'll press Alt-Shift-V again. A slash with stems down. That's not what I want. Alt-Shift-V again. How about a slash with no stems? That's what I want. And because now it doesn't matter which pitch I press, and I can also press Y, which is enter default pitch. So now if I press Y, now you can see I've got a slash region. The green doesn't print, so you won't be able to tell. And then these two are actual, it's a voice, a slash voice, so it will get the fermata symbols on there, the pause symbols if you want them. So, and if you want the details, that was on page 94 of the PDF. You also might want to add some bar repeats. So for bar repeats, so let's say in this keyboard part here, if we want a bar repeat in here, choose this bar, do Shift R again for the repeats pop over, just type %, and you get that one. Use your copy, so Alt or copy to stuff below, and I also want them over here, so I'll use Alt click to copy them over here, so you have those as well. And now what we also might want to do is let's add a very quick drum part. Have we got time? Yeah, why not? Let's do that. So now if you're following along, we're on page 97 onwards. So we're going to go to setup mode. I'm going to press Shift P. I'm going to type drum. I'm going to press enter because it will give me a drum set basic, which is what I need. This drum set basic in this part will be down here. And if I drag it, so click and drag above the piano part, it will sit above the piano part, but it's also bracketed here. And I don't actually want that. But you'll notice the voice isn't. Now the reason the drum kit is because in layout options in brackets and braces, this particular piece is bracketing following the small ensemble rules. You could change it there, or if you just want to remove that one, here's a neat trick, which is in setup mode. Here's the drum set. If you put it in its own group, so this button right down here at the bottom, put it in its own group, which is what we've done with the voice already, then it's not now bracketed with everything else because it's in its own group on its own, on its Todd. Now we're going to add some notes for the drum kit. Now, the drum kit and the definition, if you want to really know, is in here. When you click on these little 3 dots, it will show Edit Percussion Kit, and you can see that the drum kit has a 5-line staff in grey here, and here's where all of the instruments have been added onto that staff. So now to use that, we're going to double-click over here, and you can see as I move up and down, then you can see it's adding. Showing me, sorry, the readout for which instrument I'm using at this point. If you're following along in the PDF for the drum kit bit, we're now in page 99. In fact, page 100. Page 100. So we've got the caret on, and we've moved this up and down until we've got this hi-hat bit here. I'm now going to press 5. Oh, make sure I'm on the right beat. I'm going to press 5 because I want 8th notes, and I'm going to press Y. And that'll enter me a couple of notes. Did I want them there? No, I want it on beat 4. Apologies, I'll press undo. Y, there we go, we've got 2. And then if I keep going, just pressing Y, it'll keep entering hi-hats. You can also use a MIDI keyboard. You can also use some other options. So if you're really interested in drum notation, there are some other options. But for this particular piece, we'll just do that. Now for speed, I'm going to choose this bar. I'm going to press R a couple of times. And then in bar 8, I know that we again want hi-hats, but I want to press Y, so 6, Y, 5, is that what I want? No, I want the other way around, don't I? I want 5, Y, 6, Y, 5, Y, 6, Y, aware of time. So now I've got 4 bars here. Now over here, I'm going to double click again this time. I want to enter a snare drum, but I don't want a normal snare drum, because if I do that, it's going to be a bit much for this piece. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to press Alt up and it says snare drum side stick. So now I can press 6 and press Y, and I'll get a side stick. So it's automatically got an X note head. Now to enter some other notes now, if you imagine that this is like a treble clef, then the bass drum would be on the bottom space. So the bass drum would be F. So you can do that too. So if I say F, I'll get a bass drum here. I can press the space bar a couple of times to move on a couple of beats, and press C, which will give me the snare drum. Still knows it's on side stick. Great. F. What else did I want? I press space again. Now, if I press D now, it will go to the hi-hat pedal, and I don't want that. So I'm going to press Shift Alt D, which will do that one instead for a tom. C, F. So I can enter them this way. If you have a MIDI keyboard, which is normally the way I work, then that's probably a quicker option for you here. Then I want to do another C, F, and then I can press Escape or Return to stop the note input. So now I've got a simple drum part in here. If you want to repeat it, you could select all 4 bars and you could press R, or if you choose from bar 9 to bar 12, do Shift R, do %4, then we can have a 4-bar repeat, and this will now play back. If your piece isn't playing back, make sure when you go to Play and Playback template that you're not using the silence template, because that's probably what we've given you by default. Choose your Pro SE or Elements option. Depending on the version you've got, it will load all of the instruments for you correctly. You'll see them appear in the VST rack here, and once it's loaded, you'll see the little green play light comes on here. So now from here we should get something actually playing. So this little 4-bar repeat will be playing the drum kit for me automatically. And the last thing we're going to do with this drum part, or the last 2 things I should say, we're going to add some tremolos. So this hi-hat note here, because there's a bit of a gap where the singer is singing, we'll use Control to select both of those. We'll use Shift R for the repeats pop over, and you can either type 3 or you can type 3 slashes. It's up to you. I find 3 quicker. And you'll then get tremolo slashes on those as well, which will also be included in the repeat section over here. And the very last thing is we're going to enable swing, but just for the drum kit. So if you're following page 102, 103, it says you can use the Shift T pop over. So we'll do this right from the beginning. We'll do Shift T for tempo. We can start typing swing. I'm going to use the down arrow to choose swing 8ths fixed, but I'm going to press Alt Enter or Option Enter, which isn't going to do it for all of the instruments. It's only going to do it for the drum kit. So now if I select this note here and press P, in fact, let me just in the mixer turn this up just a second. Then when I press P, we should get playback. So you'll find that just the drums will swing and nothing else will, which for this particular piece is fine. It'll also tell you in the guide if you want to remove the drum set from the score, if you want to create other scores, you can do that. So basically in setup mode here, if you choose the full score, you can untick an instrument if you don't want them to appear in this score. You can also, behind my head down here, you can add a new score. So you could call this, for example, a full score without drums or without whichever instrument, and then if you untick the drum kit from that one, you'll have a full score without drums. I'm currently showing the full score here, so that's this one here, which does have the drums. So it's very flexible in Dorico with the layouts and what you want to add in there. So the last page, I think, is the final tips. So there's all sorts of final tips. If you're using Dorico Pro, then don't forget, of course, you can use the engraving options for all sorts of things where you want to set the engraving up once. You want Dorico to do that all the time, and if you really want it for all your projects, you can press Save as Default. So Command-Shift-E or Control-Shift-E for that one. There's all sorts of documentation and guides and things available. So Steinberg.help has comprehensive documentation. There's also some PDFs for the popovers and some for the text tokens, so you can find out what all of those are if you need them. There's a quick reference cards you can get, so on the Dorico blog on that resources page, dorico.com/resources, you can get those. Video tutorial links, or if you go to youtube.com/Dorico, you can get those from there. And all sorts of other options and things you can get from there. Also, the Dorico forum, so dorico.com/forum, is a very nice, active, friendly place to go and ask questions. But there's don't forget the engraving options. There's notation options. So still Command Shift, but N. So if you want to change your beam groupings globally, your note groupings, or how rests or voices work globally, or the condensing options, they exist in here as well. If it's anything to do with layouts, Command Shift L for layouts. So this is where you can set up what paper size all of your parts are using, or your scores using, or anything else. So you can set those up there. Now, I strongly recommend using the note spacing option instead of doing the manual spacing options. So instead of setting your own system breaks and that kind of thing, use the note spacing, because reducing this can often make things fit on the pages nicely for you anyway. As we said at the beginning, don't use the double click and edit these options. Do Control I for the project info, or Command I on a Mac, and edit the information in here, and it will automatically populate all of these areas for you, which is very useful. For the note spacing, note rules, so how things are grouped, you can use the popovers for that in the tempos popover. You can also use forced duration if you need to in individual cases, so there's lots of flexibility there. And don't forget, if you're editing and doing things, let's just say in a couple of parts here for trombone and cornet, there's note entry options, like especially if you have a MIDI keyboard, or even if you don't. Once the caret's on, if you press Shift down, you can extend the caret over multiple staves. So now if I press F, I get them on both staves. If I press a chord on my MIDI keyboard, I get one note in, on each staff. So there's lots of other useful options for speeding up note entry and that kind of thing if you want them. And of course, if there's things that you're doing regularly, and you're thinking, I could do with a shortcut for that, then go on a PC to Edit Preferences, on a Mac to Dorico Preferences. Go to Key Commands, search for the item you want to give a shortcut to, set yourself a shortcut, save yourself a whole bunch of time on that one as well. I'm so unhappy I made a mistake. Not a great finish. So I think I'm going to just check some of the comments and anything else, but I think that should give you a good overview. Following that first steps guide, it feels like 105 pages, but only because there's so much information and so many pictures to guide you as you go through it. So I hope that's been useful, and also following this video. Just bear with me 2 seconds while I read some of the comments from here and see if there's anything I missed. If you make the music frame margin smaller, is there an impact on ledger lines? There could be. The music frame margin is the distance between the music frame and the staff. So if there are things, text and other things that go above or below that, then yes, there may be. But it's so that you can get the staves then to line up, for example, at the top and bottoms of pages. And actually, your eye generally doesn't mind too much if there's occasional other items or ledger lines or anything else outside that. So hopefully that'll be okay. But have a play with those and the music frame margins if you want to have a look at those. Yes, if you have multiple layouts, when you're in the layout options, then if I'm in the full score layout, when I go to layout options, full score is chosen here. So that's the one I'm changing the page setup for. You can choose another one and change the page size, for example, for the trombone. If I was in a particular part, like the cornet part, and I go into layout options, then it will choose the cornet part over here. So Dorico will try and choose the correct one, but otherwise, or if the idea is that you might want to change all of your parts to all use the same size paper in one go, you can do that very easily in layout options. And there's some buttons here, not only for select all, but also for selecting individual parts. So all scores, all parts, you can use those buttons to select those should you need to. In the comments, let's have a look. Is there a way to have a slur start on one voice and end on a different voice's note? Yes, we did that, I think, in the first session. But yes, you can just control select them. So if you control select one and control select something else, I don't think I have anything with multiple voices. Let's go back to the Dora's piece here. Yes, here. So this one here, it starts here and ends here. We've now moved it above anyway. But I select that note and then control select that one. And when you press S, then you'll get a slur between those two notes, even if they're in a different voice. No problem. Oops, sorry, I just scrolled too quick. Is everything in Dorico Elements 4? Almost everything. There was one thing about removing the copyright details earlier on that you can't do in Dorico Elements, but everything else you can do in Dorico Elements, and you can make this layout look very nice, exactly like this one, in Dorico Elements, no problem. Can I hold the shortcut buttons a little longer? Oh, I'm sorry. hopefully if you press stop, or maybe I'll try that for a next session and see if I can make them show up a bit longer. But if you press pause for a second on the video, hopefully I mention what they were at the same time. Yes, glad to see the Dynamics editor return. You will get that soon. To entering Dynamics, so only affects one staff. Normally they do only affect one staff, but you may want to enter Dynamics only for one voice. You can do that as well. There is a video particularly on that, but you can also, as with many things in Dorico, to enter it locally in just one thing, you can do Alt-Enter. So you can enter a dynamic and say Alt-Enter. Only this voice I've got selected wants that dynamic. Use Alt-Enter for that, and that will give you the option. You can also, in play mode, you can specify the playback of different voices to go to different routing if you want to, different instruments even. And that's when you're looking in here. If you really want to, in the inspector for the routing section, there's an independent routing of voices. So if you need particular effect even, or a particular instrument just for one voice in Dorico, you can use that option if you want it. When you turn that on, it will basically give you an option for each of the piano voices, so you have effectively a couple of piano outputs by default, and you can tweak those accordingly should you want it. Let me have a look. Next question was Poco writ in italics between the staff. Yes, you can do that if you want to. Yep, no problem. I think we were following a particular example in this one as well. But yes, yeah, if you want to do that, no problem. Can I export all the strings as a stem or all woodwinds rather than separate players? For that one, it may be easier. Oh, as actually Peter Roos has said underneath, if you solo the strings in the mixer and then export the audio, you would get just the strings. So yes, that would also do it. You can also create a layout that only contains the strings if you want to. So if you're just working on the strings, there is a new option in Dorico 4 for it anyway, to filter things, but you can create a layout that only contains the strings, and Dorico exports whatever the full score layout at the top is here. So if you drag your full score that only contains strings to the top, you'd only get the strings anyway. And watch out, if you've changed the order of the layouts, when you do an audio export, Dorico will export the layout that is at the top of that list. So that might help you. Found a bug where the measure behaves incorrectly. Yeah, the forum is a good place to do that. So if you go to dorico.com/forum, then if you've got a particular file, especially if it's a cut down file that just has that information in it, then that's the best place to send it to our developers, and they can have a look at that for you. In fact, that's exactly what Mark said. Thank you very much, Mark Larcher. And I think I've answered James Gilbert Music's for piano music, right hand dynamics and left hand dynamics. Yes, you can do that. And yep, so I think we're all okay on the questions. So thank you for joining us in this session. What would you like to see in the next session? I think we've done all of the first steps information now. Maybe we should do a first steps for iPad. I don't know. Maybe like the entering a symphony we did, where we did some Mahler. I'm wondering about maybe doing a big band or a choral or something else, and kind of doing a note entry for that style of music. But if there are other things that you would also like to see in these Discover sessions, please let me know. There's an email address which is discoverdorico@steinberg.de, so you can let me know on that one. And if you have any comments after this, I'll stay on the chat a little bit, because YouTube will keep it going a little bit after this session. So if there's any more questions on there, but if not, just you can email us and we'll check those. So thank you very much for watching. Sorry, this is a longer session again, but hopefully we've crammed lots of information in and this will be useful, and you can refresh this one later. So thank you for joining. We'll see you next time.